Hello and welcome to Turkish Cuisine. I'm Janine Aloisi and we have a very special show for you today. And we are here at the Turkish Cultural Center in Manhattan. Today we're going to introduce some customs of celebrating Ashure. Ashure is a delicacy which can be traced back to the story of Noah's Ark. But we'll get back to the meaning of Ashure in a bit. Now we'll go to Jennifer's kitchen and get started.
Hello and welcome to my kitchen. As you know, here on Turkish Cuisine, we make home-style Turkish cooking. But today, we're dedicating this show to Ashure. It's a special show dedicated to a historical dish. It's over 5,000 years old and still alive today. Now, we have a lot of ingredients for our Ashure, and I'll explain to you about Ashure as the show goes on. And a good, authentic Ashure always has 15 or more ingredients. So let's start with our ingredients. We have half of the seeds of 1 pomegranate, a handful of golden raisins, 2 tablespoons of currants, 3 or 4 dried figs, half a cup of beans, half a cup of chickpeas, 2 tablespoons of pistachio nuts, 1 cup of walnuts, 12 dried apricots, 1 cup of granulated sugar, 1 cup of pounded wheat, 1 cup of blanched almonds, 1 tablespoon of rose water, 1 tablespoon of cinnamon, 2 tablespoons of cornstarch, and what I like to use, whole cloves. This is a special spice, and I like to use about 5 in my Ashure. So to make Ashure, you have to do some preparation from the night before. You have to take that pounded wheat that I told you before, and this is what it looks like when it's raw. This is just 1 cup of pounded wheat. You could get this at any specialty grocery store. And then what you have to do is cook it. You have to boil it the night before, and you have to use a lot of water. Cover it with the water, and as it keeps boiling, it's going to keep soaking up that water. So if you see that the water has diminished, keep adding the water, because in the end, this is what you want your washed, pounded wheat to look like. As you can see, 1 cup expanded to about 3 or 4 cups. Now every time you're making Ashure, you always make in multitudes, even if you don't want to, because it's customary to always give it out to your friends and loved ones. So this is just 1 cup of pounded wheat, but if you wanted to make more, you can just add accordingly. So what you want to do is, after that's boiled, you also want to soak your chickpeas and your beans. Now this is what it looks like raw. These are chickpeas and raw white beans. But of course, after being soaked overnight, and then you have to cook them for about half an hour. And you cook them separately because you don't know how fast one or the other is going to cook. So just cook them separately. And if you are pressed for time, you can use the can. That's always good. I mean, the can, you would get the white cannelli beans or kidney beans, and you can just get chickpeas. Just make sure when you do get the chickpeas that you have to peel them, because they'll always have a skin. And you can just press together with your thumb and forefinger, and the skin will come off. And you have to do it to all of the chickpeas. Now what we're going to do first is, this is already boiled. You strain all the water from the night before, and then you wash it. You wash it repeatedly under the sink, strain it, get it really nice and clean. You're gonna see a lot of dust coming off it anyway, so that's okay. Just wash it a few times and it's already gonna be wet. So we have to bring this to another boil. This is the day when we start making our Ashure. Our wheat is ready, our chickpeas are ready, and our beans are ready. So what I like to do first is add about 4 cups of water at room temperature. I'm going to add it to this. Now you can add more water, but you want to just make sure you're adding it accordingly, because your wheat is already wet and you don't know how much water it's retained. So we'll turn this on high, and we'll put a cover on it just so it comes up to a boil fast, and then we'll watch it. Once it starts boiling, that's when we're going to add our whole clove spice. Now these spices, they actually come from a tree and they look like a nail, and you can buy them in any supermarket, and they give a great flavor, and when they're fresh they look this rusted brown color, and actually it's really hard to grind them, so if you ever did want to grind them and store them, you need one of those machines, and keep it airtight so it stays fresh. When you use the whole ones, that's what gives it a great flavor. And we use this all throughout Mediterranean cuisine. What I like to do is once this gets boiling, I like to add about 5 of these. Gives it a great nice flavor, and then later on we'll take them out.
So many different dishes that I tried in Turkey and I would still like to try that I didn't get a chance to try.
There's so many fresh fruits and vegetables that are prepared in very unique ways in Turkey.
I like cacık a lot. It's with the yogurt and cucumbers, put a little salt in there, it's really good.
Imam Bayaldi was one that comes to mind. It's like somebody said, it's like the Imam fainted, and we always thought it was so good. The Imam fainted, so every time we take a bite, we'd go like this.
Food in Turkey is just spectacular.
We will meet several guests of various religious backgrounds in honor of our special Ashure episode. We begin with Lucinda Mosier, who's an educator in interreligious matters. Lucinda works very closely with the Turkish community and travels to Turkey. Let's hear what Lucinda has to say about Ashure.
My name is Lucinda Mosier. I'm a Christian ethicist. I have a Doctor of Theology degree with a specialization in Christian-Muslim relations. In order to get Muslim help with my doctorate, I turned to friends, and the help that came was from Turkish ethicists. So my connection to Turkey is very deep in scholarly circles, but also for the last maybe 6 or 7 years, I've been working with Turkish Americans who have been interested in dialogue with Christians and just improving Americans' understanding of Turkish culture, which means I've gotten to eat a lot of Turkish food. And I do enjoy kebab, I enjoy the tea, I especially like the tea, and pretty much anything that I've ever had in a Turkish meal I have thought was just wonderful. We do have a few good Turkish restaurants here in New York, but I've also had the opportunity to eat Turkish food in Istanbul and Konya and in people's homes in Turkey, as well as in some fine restaurants. Your seafood is wonderful. And so, all in all, it's my pleasure to be talking on a program dedicated to Turkish cuisine. Now, we're talking specifically about Ashure, which is a holiday that Muslims celebrate, but Christians, at least in America, do not. And so, part of what Turkish Americans have been doing for the rest of us in the last number of years has been to introduce us to this custom of sharing Noah's pudding. Now, the story of Noah, as I'm sure you all know, is a story that's told wonderfully in both the Bible and the Quran. It's told a little differently in those two texts, but the basics are the same. And it provokes a lot of imagination. It's such a wonderful story that building Noah's Arks for children to play with is something that American Christians and probably Christians in other parts of the world have done for many, many years. My children had Noah's Ark play toys, and they liked to line up the animals. But my mother, who's 82, has the largest Noah's Ark collection of anyone I know. She has some antique arks with pairs of animals. She has some contemporary ones made of plastic for children to play with, and she even has a Christmas tree with all of the ornaments being related to the story of Noah and the Ark. It's quite amazing. I was in Istanbul a couple of summers ago in the part of Istanbul called Eyüp, and sitting there in Eyüp drinking tea and saying, you know, I've heard all about Noah's pudding. I have no idea what it tastes like. And they said, oh, we can get you some right now. And so I had my first taste of Noah's pudding in Eyüp, and that was quite fun. the organization is called TAMIF, Turkish American Multicultural Educational Foundation, asked if I could help them bring Noah's pudding to some Christians. And so the group we chose were those students studying to be priests in the Episcopal Church, America's branch of the Anglican Communion. So on a Friday afternoon, members of TAMIF brought probably 50 little containers of Noah's pudding to General Seminary, and the seminarians, the students for the priesthood and their children all sat around and ate the pudding, learned about the Muslim understanding of the Noah story, shared their understandings, and just had a wonderful afternoon eating Noah's pudding and drinking tea together. It was a great conversation, and I think that sort of conversation is very helpful, and I hope to be able to facilitate many more like it. And I do think that the bringing of Noah's pudding to people who know very little, if anything, about this custom is a great one. As it's done year after year here in New York and in other cities around the United States, people will begin to expect it and will delight that it's coming again. And because the Muslim calendar floats through the solar year, it comes at different times of year. And there will come a time when Noah's pudding distributions and Christmas line up. There will be times when it lines up with Easter. There will be times when it lines up with important Jewish holidays. It's a way of building bridges through food, and we know that sharing a meal together, sharing any kind of food together, is a way to seal a friendship. So I do think that the fact that we have so many Turkish cultural organizations around America now, and each of them each year during this special holiday distributes Noah's pudding, is an important step toward developing understanding of each other at a new level. It's fun, it's tasty, and it encourages us to examine our shared stories and to understand each other better, and only good can come of that.
So while we're waiting for our wheat to come to a boil, I've peeled all of my chickpeas. Now it's time to chop up my dried fruit. Now for my dried fruit, I'm going to use some figs and some dried apricots. Because remember, a long time ago, they used only the ingredients that were around. Ashure in English is called Noah's pudding. Now Noah's pudding comes from the story of Noah, which you may know the story. It's very popular in all of history and a lot of religions. It was 5,000 years ago, and Noah was trying to warn the people of the coming flood. God sent them the angel of Gabriel to warn him about the flood, but there were a lot of non-believers. So Noah packed up all the believers, the animals, and everything that he can find, and they set sail for 40 days until the flood was over. And then once the flood was over, they were close to starvation. So what Noah did was he gathered up all the fresh fruits and legumes he can find, and he made this delicious dessert soup, which is actually a pudding. It's called Noah's pudding, but it's not a pudding as you may know here in America. It's a more soupy, more watery type of dish, and it's filled with just fresh fruits and all these beans and nuts, because they had to find all the natural ingredients, and they had to use what they had so they wouldn't starve. And in celebration of them not starving, they make this every year, and especially in Turkey, it's very common, it's very popular, and the holiday actually, it falls different every year, but this year it happens to be the 29th. So we're going to celebrate it by making lots of ashure and handing it to our neighbors, our friends and families and loved ones, because that's what I was talking about before. Sometimes it looks like it's a lot for one family, but it's meant to be shared. My husband always tells me stories about when he was growing up. His neighbors always made it, and people always made it for my mom, and my mom kept the tradition in our home here in America. So she always made ashure growing up, and my son loves it too. So it's very delicious. So what we're going to do now is just finish cutting up our apricots and our figs. And I love to use all these dried fruits. It goes great with our raisins and the nuts. What we have to do is wash them. Now the reason we're going to wash them is because if we put them in right away in the boiling water, it's going to give off color. And we don't want that. So what we're going to do is wash it under cold water a few times, dunk out the water, wash it again, and then let it sit in that cool water until we're ready to throw it in. So once our wheat is boiling, you want it to boil for at least 10 minutes before you start putting in any ingredients. So it's been boiling for 10 minutes, and I'm going to add in our cloves, our delicious whole cloves. It's going to give it a great flavor, and I'm going to add in about 5. Now you don't leave these in the whole time. We'll take them out at the end. Now if you're wondering why we haven't put the sugar in yet, because the sugar goes in last. Anytime you make Ashure, you have to put the sugar in last, because if you put it in right at the beginning, it'll make the bottom burn and it'll stick, so you don't want that. So you want the sugar to last. Plus, you're going to put in all your dried fruits and your raisins, and that's going to give it a natural sweetness. So that's why you're going to add in your sugar accordingly. Some people like to add 2 cups of sugar, some people only half a cup, so it depends on how sweet you want it. So you just want to give this a good mix and let that boil for at least 5 minutes, and then we're going to add in our dried fruit.
Another special guest is Haldun Yavish. He is the Executive Director of the Turkish Cultural Center. This center focuses on strengthening the ties between the United States and Turkey. In the month of February, they will be organizing several events in celebration of Ashure. We had a chance to speak with Mr. Yavish. Let's watch.
We organize seminars, concerts, trips to Turkey, lectures, and courses. For example, as a concert, we had Ahmet Özcan's concert with the whirling dervishes, 12 whirling dervishes. We organize annual holiday receptions, which represents Hanukkah, Christmas, and at the same time our holiday, which is the Eid of the holiday for sacrifice, which is called Eid al-Adha also. We have educational lectures, seminars, which is, for example, small business administrations consultants came to the cultural center, and they taught the listeners how to manage the business, how to become a successful businessman. Even though Turkish Cultural Center had just 6 months of experience in the city, the center did a great job. Like our biggest event was in Waldorf Astoria, and it was named as Annual Ramadan Friendship Dinner. It was in the Waldorf Astoria, which is the best hotel in the city. It was in October 5th of 2006, and Hillary Clinton, the First Lady, came to the event, and she gave a wonderful speech. She had some wonderful words in terms of the necessity of interfaith dialogue, the necessity of intercultural dialogue, plus what Turkish Cultural Center brings to the city. Also, we organize lectures within our cultural center. Like the previous one was the vice president of Fordham University. He was our guest, and he joined one of our seminars. We have also Turkish language courses here, and we teach Turkish. On the other side, we give ESL courses for the Turkish students who come from Turkey, and they need assistance, especially for speech, for spelling. We have a library here, and the Turkish library, the Turkish Cultural Center's library, is a resource for the people, for the American people, for the academicians who make research in the history of Turkey, history of Ottomans. This library is a resource for everyone. We will start Turkish cooking classes here. Turkish American Women's Association, which is one of our committee within the Turkish Cultural Center, they are starting the Turkish cooking lessons. I guess which is amazing. I mean, most of the American people love baklava, They love dolma. So the Turkish Cultural Center is the place for them to learn also how to cook baklava. As Turkish Cultural Center, we spent the whole month of February as the month of Ashure, and we will make several events. Normally, Ashure Day is 29th of January, but instead of just celebrating one day of Ashure, we made a whole month of Ashure, which is February will be the month of Ashure for us. So like we will expand our celebration to a month, and we will give out Ashure to the people who need, the homeless people, especially in New York City. There are 7,000 homeless people in New York City, and we will try to reach as much as we can. And we just had a meeting with the commissioner of the New York City for the homeless department, and we told him about our idea, what we will do, and he said, please, make the event as much as possible and reach out as much as possible to the homeless people. And at the same time, we will give Ashure to the elder people, and we will visit nursing homes, and we are planning to give out like almost 10,000 Ashure in a whole month. We as Turkish Cultural Center believe in that the interfaith dialogue, the intercultural dialogue is the only solution for the global peace. For this purpose, Turkish Cultural Center strengthens the ties between the people of United States and Turkey.
So once you have the whole cloves boiling in there for 5 minutes, now it's time to add our dried fruit. And you saw when I was washing it all the color that comes off. So you really want it to be clear water when the fruit is sitting in there. So just open the lid. Now at home, if you're boiling it and the water rises and it bubbles up, don't worry, just lift your lid off, let it go back down, and then put the lid back on. At the end, when it comes to a really nice rolling boil, then you can do it on a low simmer without the cap. So we just want to squeeze this fruit and put it in there. And then we have raisins, but the raisins also go in at the end. Now, like I said before, we use currants and the golden raisins. Currants are a very small type of raisins. We use them throughout a lot of cooking in Middle Eastern cuisine, in dolmas and other things like that. They're very small and they're very tart. They look like a raisin, they're just much more tart. And the golden raisins, in fact, in some recipes, if you're looking, you may see sultanas. Now, if you do see something that says sultanas, that means a golden raisin. They call it a sultana because it actually comes from a sultana grape, which sultan actually comes from the word sultan from Turkey because the grapes originated from Turkey. So because sultan was the king, they called these grapes sultanas, like feminine kings. And actually that's where they get the name. So if you see sultanas, don't worry, they're just your golden raisins that you can find at any supermarket. So now we're just going to let that boil a little bit before we add in the rest of our ingredients.
We'll get back to Jennifer's kitchen in a moment. Next, I'd like you to meet Rabbi Joseph Potasnik, who's a member of the New York Board of Rabbis. We had a very meaningful interview with him, and he also spoke some interesting things about Ashure and Turkish culture.
My name is Joseph Potasnik, Rabbi, Executive Vice President of the New York Board of Rabbis. This is the largest, what we call, interdenominational organization of its kind in the rabbinic world, which means we have rabbis of all the different branches of Jewish life: Orthodox, Conservative, Reform, Reconstructionist, and somehow we find a vocabulary for all people to talk to each other, even though there are different approaches to religion. For example, there are those who believe that the Torah, the Bible, came from God, and there are others who believe it came from human beings. And regardless of what your belief is, we say there has to be a place where people can discuss differences with one another without destroying each other, without denigrating each other, and this is that address. It's interesting that here you are observing Ashure, And the word eser in Hebrew is 10. Now, if you look at the Jewish calendar, on the 10th day in the Hebrew month of Tishrei, we have what's called the Day of Atonement, or Yom Kippur. There's a Muslim month on the 10th day, you have Ashure. So again, we find a common denominator. And on the Day of Atonement, we understand that we don't eat. It's a fast day. Why do we fast? What's the purpose of it? The purpose is very simple, that we talk about helping the hungry and helping the homeless and helping those who are hurting. How are you going to help them if you don't know how it feels? So we say you have to suffer that day. You have to know what it is to go without food, because that will sensitize you to the suffering of others. And if you look at the Ashure concept, and Noah was one who tried to convince the world to change its ways, to withdraw, to give up paganism, to believe in God, to develop a more ethical kind of value system. He was ridiculed by many, and finally he had a retreat, built an ark, and took animals into the ark to save that part of the world so they could start again. So it's a day, like a Day of Atonement, Ashure, when you have to look at your behavior and you have to say, what changes do I have to make in myself to inspire other people to think about how to make this a better world? If I can help people, maybe I should be visiting the sick more often. Maybe I should be giving more charity. But all of us make mistakes, and all of us can do better. We often say that a pencil has an eraser, because you're going to make a mistake. You're not going to write everything perfectly, and you have to learn to correct those mistakes. So Day of Atonement, Ashure, it's a day of reflection. It's a day of saying, what have I done wrong? I know what I've done right. I always find people remember all the good things they did, and they try to forget some of the bad things. But let's remember some of the things that we could have done, should have done, but maybe this year we'll correct those mistakes and improve our behavior. You know, I talk about fasting, but also food is important. I don't have to convince that of those who are listening. But you know, you have Ramadan in the Muslim tradition, and how important, how people take that so seriously, and they will go all day without eating. And again, that also gets people to improve the relationship to God, to one another. But there comes, after fasting comes feasting. So you have a chance to say, look, I know what it is to be without food, but I also learn how to have food. When I say how to have food, you know, I see sometimes when people go to sit down and eat, they just grab the food. They eat quickly and run away. Well, after Ramadan, after Yom Kippur, you sit down and you have a meal with family, with friends. But it's a meal that is enjoyed with certain appreciation for the fact that you have food, for people who don't have food, appreciation for the people who prepare the food, appreciation for God who gives you the ability to eat the food. So it's not just a matter of a meal. It's not just a matter of a feast. It's a matter of a celebration of all the blessings of life. Because when you're fasting, you realize what you don't have. When you're feasting, you also can recognize what you do have.
So once this has been boiling for another 5 minutes after you put in your fruit, we could start adding in some of our nuts. Now I know I said a cup of blanched almonds, but we're only going to use half now and half the rest for a garnish. A great thing about Ashure is that it has a lot of things to garnish it with. A lot of the things you put on top, like the pistachios and the walnuts, and you sprinkle some raisins. Has a great variety all on top. And it's supposed to be like a pudding, but remember, it's not like the pudding that you know. It's like a soupy pudding, almost like not too watery, but not too thick, just the right consistency. That's really what you want. And people eat Ashure hot, they eat it cold. I mean, it could be eaten anytime, but if you don't get to eat it while it's hot, just put it in the fridge and serve it while it's cold, and it's delicious anyway. So we're gonna put in now our chickpeas. And you could put these in towards the end because remember, they're already cooked about 20 to 30 minutes. So now we'll just add in some currants, give it a really nice tangy flavor, and also our golden raisins. Now you could add the dark ones too. Just remember, the dark ones may give off color, so you may want to wash those. These are a nice golden color and they don't give off any color, so you could just throw them in like that. We'll actually save some for our garnish. And you want to bring that to a boil, and also maybe now's a good time to add our cornstarch. Now add the cornstarch in slowly. Cornstarch is something that thickens. So anytime you want to make a gravy or anything and you want it to make it thicker, just add some cornstarch. So we'll add a little bit at first and we'll see how it goes. Just want to mix it up and see how thick it gets. And then once that thickens up a little bit, we can add our rose water. So once we've been letting that boil for a few more minutes and really letting those flavors blend together, now it's time to take out our cloves. Now you want to take out the cloves before you add the rose water and the sugar. They're usually floating around on top, so you don't want someone to eat the cloves. So once you have all your cloves out, what we want to do is just add our rose water. Now I've seen some people substitute the rose water for vanilla extract, so if you want you can do that as well. And we're going to add in our sugar, and then once we add this together, we're going to really let it boil for at least another 15 minutes and let those flavors really blend in well. And like I said, you can use less sugar or more. Taste it while you're cooking it. See how much flavor and sugar that the other dried fruits have given off to your delicious Ashure. And you can even smell the aroma that the cloves give this delicious dessert. It just fills up the air. It's kind of like a nutmeg with cinnamon or something, but it really makes such a difference. Just those 5 little cloves, just boiling them up, it really makes it smell great, and already you can see the blend of the colors. It looks beautiful. It just looks really beautiful. So you just want to mix this up and let this boil all together. Now, as far as the nuts go, I've seen people put some peanuts or hazelnuts. So if you wanted, you can be creative. You can add a little more. If you didn't like one of these nuts, you can just substitute it. It's okay. As long as you get the main gist of it, it's fine. I've seen some people add rice to their Ashure. This is the traditional style. This is the way my mother always made it, and this is what we grew up on. So this is kind of the way we like it. So basically now we're coming to the end. We're just going to let that boil for at least another 15 minutes, really get that sugar in there, and then taste it. If you think you want it sweeter, you can add another ½ a cup. Add gradually. Now what I want to talk about now is the pomegranate. The pomegranate looks like this when you buy it. It's whole. And when you cut it, it has little seeds in it. And these little seeds that you see are actually the fruit. And pomegranates are so popular these days. They're filled with antioxidants and it's good for the heart and the skin. And how people eat it is you really want to cut it. And you want to do this before people come over. And you kind of have to scoop out these seeds. So if you want, you can use a spoon, which I have right here. And you just keep scooping them out. Now you don't eat the white part. You just eat the seeds. And what you do, and it gets really messy, so make sure you have a big bowl. And what I have done over here is I've just set aside ½ a cup. I just really wanted to show you what a pomegranate is and how you're supposed to clean it. And pomegranate was so popular, especially 5,000 years ago. They just used the most natural ingredients. And pomegranate was one of the main things that they always used. My mother-in-law even has a pomegranate tree in her backyard. So it's great, I get these all the time. So we're just going to wait for this to boil, really let that simmer, and then we're going to get ready to serve it in our serving platter and garnish it with all the rest of these ingredients.
Our next guest is from the Turkish consulate in New York City. Gazi Erdem is a religious affairs attaché. He will explain to us the significance of Ashure from an Islamic perspective.
When we come to Ashure, as a root, it comes from Arabic word ashara, and it means 10. And accordingly, from that root, Ashure or Ashara means 10th of Muharram. Muharram is the first year of Islamic calendar, so it is the important date for Muslims because the Muslim calendar starts with that day, and in addition to that, 10th of Muharram is very important day for Muslims. Actually, it is not only important for Muslims, but also very important for Christians and Jewish believers, because those dates marks important point for those believers. For example, it is the date of Moses, who escaped from Egypt, from tyranny of Egyptian rulers, with his community, and the date actually also marks the date of Abraham's following to fire, or his releasing from fire. So this is very important for Muslims as well, because Muslims in general believe all those prophets as their own prophets, and this is a part of their belief. As a Muslim, in that day, Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam saw the Jewish people when he came to Medina. They were fasting and said, "We should fast. It's not farce." Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam recommended that day for his companions to fast that day. So it becomes a sunnah for the Muslims. So when you look at the Muslims all over the world today, most of the people, most of the Muslims fast in this particular day. And the other thing actually, as a common thing between all religions, because it marks to Noah's, peace be upon him, action, or Noah's surviving from the flood. That point, it's that point actually, that day it happened, 10th of Muharram, and they made a special food on that day. What they find in their ship, they got together everything what they found and put in a dish and made a very nice food, and that food actually became a custom for believers. Nowadays we follow that custom, the custom of Nuh, and we call that dish as Noah's pudding. This is very important, especially in Muslim culture, because the custom teach us and teach our children, our generation, to share. Sharing is very important part of Islam, and since this custom teach us sharing, it becomes accordingly very important. So nowadays actually we can see Muslim people making their Noah's pudding, share with the neighbors, share with the other believers, share with the other people, share even who doesn't know anything about that culture. So it's very important for us to teach the custom of that prophet. So when we look at the event from all sides, it's very important for Muslims. As the last point, I would like to celebrate all of your Ashure Day, Noah's Pudding Day, and I hope this is gonna be a very good custom in this country for the people of America. Peace be with you all.
once we waited for all of our flavors to blend together nicely, our Ashure is almost ready. So just because it's cooked doesn't mean it's done. As you can see, I still have a lot of ingredients up on here because the garnish for our Ashure is very important. So now this is very hot, and 4 cups of water was just perfect for this amount. I'm just going to pour it in our serving platter. You could see the beautiful colors. Just be careful. And this is very healthy for you with all the antioxidants that all the pomegranates have, and the raisins and the fruits and the nuts. It's so great. So now it's still not done because we still have to garnish it. What we're going to do is grab some of our walnuts. And now you can eat this hot in the house, but just so you know, when you go to restaurants, most of the time it's served cold. It's only eaten hot when people make it in the house. And of course, when it's fresh hot, the stovetop, you give it to your friends and your family and your neighbors and your loved ones, because that's why we make this, to share it with the people we love. And as you can see, you already see the colors meshing together well as the garnish. The garnish is very important. And that's why you want to save a little bit of the almonds and the raisins, because it gives it really a great color. And the finishing touch on the garnish, for me, is the pomegranate. Because the pomegranate, besides the fact that it tastes so good, it's so healthy. It's rich in antioxidants, it's good for your blood, it's good for your health, and it's so popular. And I just love pomegranate, so I'm gonna put a lot in there because I like it when every time I serve it for somebody, I'd love them to get just a little tangy bite. And of course, last but not least, we have our cinnamon. So just take a little spoon and kind of dance it around the whole top. And this is our delicious Ashure. You see, it was a little overwhelming with all those ingredients, but it's really quite easy. I mean, as long as you're putting your love into it, it's always lots of fun. And I had lots of fun making it, and your family's gonna enjoy eating it, and they're all gonna see how delicious and wonderful it tastes. So this is our famous historical Ashure Noah's pudding. I loved making it with you. I can't wait to eat it. And now I'm gonna get ready to serve it to my friends, to my family, and to my loved ones.
Well, that was our special Ashure episode. I hope you enjoyed yourself and learned a lot, and we'll make Ashure a special part of your family traditions. I'm Janine Aloisi, and I'll see you next time.